a storm is coming and you're worried about your plants. But with a little bit of preparation, you really don't need to worry much. Join me today as I share with you some ideas for storm protection for your garden. Hi, I'm Gardener Scott, and like most gardeners, my garden suffers from the impact of severe weather on an annual basis. Be it winds, heavy rain, or worse yet, hail. My plants suffer if I don't anticipate that weather and take some precautions. The key to protecting your garden and your plants is preparation. You may have noticed that this is new. This is my new enclosed metal bed area, and I've covered the entire space with hail cloth because I know at some point the hail is coming. And with my pumpkins, my corn, all tomatoes, all the peppers, if they're not protected, they can be devastated, as happened last year before I could get the hail cloth up. But with this preparation, I feel more comfortable having the plants in this area and having them survive a severe weather impact. Now, this took a lot of work, and this is not necessarily the best solution for you. There are lots of other options, simpler options, to handle the severe weather in your garden. Here are a couple ways that I'm working to minimize potential storm damage on these beds. During the heat of summer, I'll cover many of my plants with shade cloth, like I'm doing with these tomatoes right here. Well, shade cloth plays double duty. Just by putting a bit of it at the top of this trellis, it will help diffuse any hail that's falling on this bed. So I'm using the shade cloth for one purpose, to help shelter the plants from the harsh sun, but it's also protecting the plants from hail, as is this row cover on the bed over here. I've got the row cover on these plants to keep them from being eaten by insects, but it does double duty by helping to diffuse heavy rain, wind, and potential hail. The row cover is a lighter material, and it's really not designed for hail. And in a heavy storm like I had recently, it can actually punch some holes. But I'd rather have an area like this, where it looks like the hail didn't make it all the way through. It damaged the fabric, but it didn't damage the plants. I have shade cloth completely covering these more tender vegetables. And so this offers complete protection from potential hail. And even a heavy rain can be diffused by shade cloth. The hoops and covers are nice to have in place on a mostly permanent basis. But for the quick response, when I see a storm coming and I don't have a hoop or shade cloth or hail protection all ready to go, I use a lot of these, which you probably have as well. These are just nursery pots from shrubs and trees that I bought and then saved the containers afterward. And I just turn these over and cover the younger plants that might be susceptible to hail or heavy rain or even some wind damage. Now, as you might guess, these can blow over in the wind. So I'll take bamboo stakes, put them through the drainage holes, and these will help anchor the pots in place so that they're not blowing all over the yard and potentially damaging other plants that they might be blown into. If you don't have any of the black nursery pots, my guess is that you probably have some 5-gallon buckets. Well, you can do the same thing. Cover with a bucket. Now, there aren't holes to stick bamboo through, so take a nice heavy rock to hold it in place. And your plants are protected. But This is a temporary measure. This is great at keeping hail and heavy rain and wind off of your plants, but it's not allowing any sunlight through. So as soon as the severe weather passes, go ahead and take these off your plants so that they can continue to grow. I use the shade cloth and the row cover over my hoops and trellises at different times of the year. But I like to keep the hoops and trellises in place even when they're not covered, because these act as a great support for anything that I choose to throw over them, especially when the severe weather threatens. I have pre-cut pieces of plastic ready to go in my shed. And so with the hoop already in place, if the storm is coming, it's a simple matter of just taking a few seconds, covering the hoops, using the spring clamps that I also keep in place, and in almost no time at all, this bed is completely protected. And so now, wind, hail, heavy rain, this plastic is going to protect these plants. This is 6 mil plastic, and it's done a pretty good job over time fighting back the hail. And it's reusable for years to come. This plastic over hoops will heat up the soil and air underneath, but I don't have to rush like I do with the 5-gallon buckets. There's airflow through this space, and so I can leave it in place through the day and overnight, and then remove it when I'm sure that the storm is past. Hardware cloth is a great thing to use to protect young plants from hail. I just take a piece of hardware cloth. This is 1/2 inch. You can get it in different sizes. 1/4 inch works great as well. I form it into the shape of a small dome and just put it over the plants. And the weight is enough to hold it in place. In really high winds, I might also anchor it with bamboo, but I've never had an issue with that. As the hail hits this metal, it tends to break apart. There might be minimal damage, but not as much as I would have without this hardware cloth. And I can also take long strips of this cloth and lean it against trellises in rows, like I do with my strawberries. For vining plants, like with these tomatoes, I always make sure that they're anchored on the twine or the trellis at multiple places, so that when the wind comes, they can move a little bit, but they're not going to be blown over and torn apart by the wind. You might have guessed, with all the blowing wind and the darkening sky, that I have a storm coming. And yes, it's true. I already start feeling a few raindrops, but I'm not concerned because my garden is ready. You saw everything I do to protect my plants, from a permanent structure that I don't have to worry at all about, to those planter's pots that I put over my plants. It's all about preparation, having everything ready to go. And there have been many times when the hail hits that I rush out and I'm being pelted by the hail, but I grab what I need from my shed, put it in place, and the plants are protected at minimal damage to me and virtually no damage to my plants. You can do the same with a little bit of planning, a little bit of preparation to protect your garden, whatever the weather throws at it. If you'd like to see how I do the hoops and have some ideas for your own, I suggest you watch this video next. And then also, while you're at it, maybe consider watching these. I'm Gardener Scott. Enjoy gardening.